The woman thought she had found a kitten in the woods, but after a year she found out what it was. "Ma'am, that's not a cat," the vet said, taking a step back. "I need you to do exactly as I say," he continued. His brows knitted as he took another light step back, holding up his clipboard to protect his face. "That's not a cat. Walk slowly away and close the door behind you. No sudden movements." But she didn't listen. Defending it. The cat hissed and snarled on the vet's table, turning to her with its fangs bared. "Are you listening to me, Mrs. McKinley? That's not a cat." She'd not stopped for a second to consider that what she was carrying wasn't a cat. She pushed that thought away as soon as it cropped up in her head. Now her whole town was in grave danger. The perfect pet. For Jasmine McKinley, this was supposed to be the perfect pet addition her home needed. She'd always complained to her husband Dennis about how they didn't have enough pets around the house. They'd had a dog before, but had to put it down because of old age. Their cat, Moople, was the only animal left. Well, that was until Jasmine found the cat loitering at the local park. Going for a walk. It had been a morning like no other, and the 50-year-old Omaha native was getting her morning steps in. She'd been having a difficult week, with her last born finally going to college and her husband having just put their dog down. The loneliness had gotten to her, and she would have done anything to fill the void within. She didn't know what a terrible mistake she was about to make. An odd-looking animal. The animal in question, brown-coated with long pointed ears, had been cute and cuddly from the moment she laid her eyes on it. Having just rained that morning, the animal's fur was soaked wet. Not knowing that this made it appear smaller than it really was, Jasmine approached the creature. She'd regret this decision soon enough. Just a little grumpy. "Here, kitty," she called out to the oddly wet cat, and it growled at her. "Someone's a little grumpy, I see," Jasmine answered with a smile. She'd already talked to Dennis about needing another pet in the house, so she knew he wouldn't mind her coming home with a new friend. But she didn't realize this was no cat at all. Going back home. The animal kept growling at Jasmine as she picked it up and hurried back to her car with it. Since her house was just a few blocks from the park, it didn't take her long to reach home. She brought the animal in despite its many protests in the form of trying to bite and scratch her. "I'm just trying to help," she'd say soothingly each time this would happen, hoping the cat would settle down. Make yourself at home. She warmed some milk and even prepared a bath for the animal, hoping to feed and clean it before officially welcoming it to her family. She even brought in her other cat, Moople, to say hi, but the little bundle of joy, which always got along with other pets, didn't want to come close to the animal. This should have been Jasmine's next clue that what she had in her hands wasn't a cat. Time for a bath. The mom didn't pay any attention. She reprimanded Moople for being hostile and went ahead to make her new pet feel at home. It kept snarling and growling throughout its cleaning. As if it wasn't for the gloves that Jasmine had on, it would have bit and scratched her skin. But the worst was still ahead for her. Feeding time. After giving her new pet a shower, Jasmine tried to feed it some milk, but the animal wouldn't drink. She tried some of Moople's dry cat food. It didn't work. She even brought out a can of tuna, which every cat loves, but the kitty only stared at it, hissed, and turned to bare its fangs at Jasmine. There was only one thing she could do now. Going to the vet's. Jasmine brought out Moople's cage and helped the new pet in. All the while it continued to snarl, trying to scratch her hands. Was it rabid or sick? She didn't know, but needed to get to the root of it. The only thing she could do now was rush to the vet and get an analysis. She was willing to break the bank to save her new pet. At the vet's office. The vet was quick to welcome Jasmine into his office. She'd been bringing her pets here for decades, and the two had become good friends. But his smile receded the moment he lay eyes on what she was carrying in Moople's cage. "That's new," he intoned with a raised brow. "What breed is he?" "Feisty little fella." He mentioned for Jasmine to release the animal onto the table so they could start their session. Typically, they would chat as he did his checkup. but his eyes widened as Jasmine placed the cage on the table. "Feisty little fella," she said with a nervous laugh. "Yeah," the vet answered, leaning in to get a better look at the creature. And that's when it happened. Something's wrong. Jasmine opened the cage and the animal sprang out, hissing at the vet as if to challenge him. "He's been like this since morning," a worried Jasmine reported, but the vet didn't even spare her a look. "You said he was a cat, right?" he asked. "Yes," answered Jasmine. "Mrs. McKinley, that is not a cat." "You need to leave." "I need you to back away slowly," the vet whispered. "No sudden movements, especially if you love your eyeballs and want them to remain attached inside their sockets." "What?" Jasmine asked. Fear drilled through her veins as her eyes finally opened. What she was looking at was not a cat. It turned to her, its tail straight and head hung low. Its imposing snarl would be the last thing she hears.